The children were still singing when the sky cracked open. By the time the screams reached orbit, it was already delayed. The colony of Vespera 3 had no military. It had gardens, orchards that stretched beneath golden light domes, humming with bees. It had libraries carved into cliffsides, and laughter echoing across terraced valleys. It was Earth's hope for peace, a fresh start after the Martian rebellions, far beyond the contested zones of the Orion Reach. And then, in a blink, it was ash. No warning, no transmission, no negotiation, just the Varun, the Galactic Empire's most ruthless enforcers, a race bred for domination. With starcruisers like black bones jutting from space, they descended on Vespera 3 like executioners. Their message to the rest of humanity was not written in words, but in the cratered ruin of what was once home to 14,000 human souls. Not a single body was recovered. Orbiting the debris field aboard the derelict ISV Kestrel, Captain Idris Harlan stood unmoving. His fists clenched so tightly blood dripped from his palms. They were 2 hours late. Just 2. The Kestrel had been rerouted by a Varun patrol for routine scans. By the time they reached Vespera, there was no atmosphere to breathe, no transmission to decode, only dust and irradiated echoes. Idris wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't a strategist. He was a former Earth Fleet interceptor pilot, demoted after refusing to abandon trapped colonists during the Caltros Drift siege. They called it insubordination. He called it being human. Now, Vespera was gone, and Idris Harlan was the only witness. Still no response from Earth. Asked Malavos, the Kestrel's comms engineer. Her voice trembled beneath the static. She was born on Vespera. Idris nodded once. They're listening. They just don't know what to say. He looked out the viewport. Floating in silence was a child's drawing, laminated, spinning slowly, a crayon sun, a stick family, the words, "When I grow up, I want to fly." His jaw tightened. Behind him, the crew gathered in silence, 11 souls, all human, all aching, a medic, a botanist, the ex-Marines, and the rest civilian support. None trained for war, all now staring at the price of peace. Download everything, Idris said. Sensor logs, radiation traces, orbital decay patterns. I want every piece of that genocide burned into the black box. For what? Asked Lieutenant Kale, the youngest among them. The Senate's going to vary this, just like Cassio, just like Lerna. Idris turned. His eyes were iron. Not this time. Vespera was not a military target. No strategic value. No fleet presence. The only explanation was one chilling possibility. The Varun were sending a message. But to whom? Idris already knew the answer. Earth's expansion had stretched afar. The Empire wanted to remind them of their place, but they made one mistake. They didn't kill Idris Harlan. That night, while the rest of the crew mourned in silence, Idris sat alone in the Kestrel's war room, an ancient chamber, barely functional, filled with dust-covered consoles and obsolete defense protocols. He activated the emergency relay, the kind Earth never wanted used again. A cold blue light swept the room. Retina verification, pulse code, DNA check, access granted, Earth strategic command. The screen flickered. A woman appeared, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, wrapped in the insignia of the Post-Terran Defense Coalition. Captain Harlan, she said flatly, "We received your transmission. I assume your claim is accurate?" He sent the visuals, the screams, the black glass ruins, the dead sky. She watched it all without blinking. Then, slowly, she leaned forward. The Empire wiped out a peaceful colony under our flag, without warning, without cause. Yes, Idris said, and we let it happen. No, she replied coldly. They let it begin, later, alone again. Idris stared at the flickering stars outside the hull. Mila approached quietly, setting down a cracked datapad. They found something in the debris, she whispered. Deepskin picked it up under the crust. Idris raised an eyebrow. What is it? A beacon. Buried deep. Not ours. He stood. Alien, she nodded slowly, and not Varun. Something older. Something watching Idris's. Voice dropped to a whisper. Then Vespera wasn't just erased. It was chosen. The second colony died before the first funeral was held. And this time, the Varun didn't even try to hide it. Earth's diplomats begged for time. The Senate stalled, trading silence for stability, but the Varian moved with surgical cruelty. Edalon Station, a mining outpost near the edge of the Orc climb, was vaporized in less than 5 minutes. No demand, No declaration, just another message on a kestrel orbiting the ruins of Vespera 3. Captain Idris Harlan watched the holo footage in eerie quiet. A sleek crescent-shaped Varun dreadnought descending, unleashing a concussive wave of black plasma that folded space like paper. The outpost fractured in real time. 90 of the humans gone, families, engineers, children asleep in low-G cradles. Mila Voss whispered, "That's the same ship class, Wraith model. They're hunting us." Idris said nothing. He was already pulling up fleet codes, his eyes burning with something far colder than rage, purpose. In the days following the second attack, Earth's skies darkened. Cities on Luna, Titan, and Earth itself watched the Senate's emergency broadcast with growing dread. The representative of the Varun, a towering obsidian-shelled figure called Threx Ilzarak, stood unblinking before the Terran assembly. "We warned you," it said in perfect Terran dialect. "Your species breeds recklessness, expansion, defiance. The price is clarity." Earth's delegation demanded justification. The Varun gave none. Instead, they transmitted a list. 12 human colonies and stations marked for strategic purification. Vespera and Idalan were merely the first. Across the stars, humanity trembled. But on the bridge of the Kestrel, Idris Harlan began to plan. "What are we actually going to do?" Mila snapped, voice sharp, brittle with grief. "Earth won't strike back. They're terrified. The last time we challenged the Varun, we lost 3 fleets in under an hour." Kale muttered, "And 6 million people." Silence gripped the room. Idris didn't flinch. "They think fear makes us predictable," he said. "It's what the Varun don't understand. They think they're teaching us to kneel." He paused, voice hardening. "But all they're doing is giving us nothing left to lose." He tapped the old war console. "We have Earth's eyes now. Strategic Command didn't shut me down. They listened, and we're going to give them a reason to fight." That night, Idris stood alone in the cryo vault. Among the shadows of frost-lined walls lay forgotten horrors, relics from Earth's darkest hours, weapons too dangerous to use, even in the AI wars. He found it beneath Loxiel Omega Black Project. Halo, not a weapon, a virus. Digital, adaptive, and terrifyingly intelligent. Created to dismantle AI god cores during the fall of Europa Station. Banned after it nearly infected Earth's own defense grid. Idris didn't touch the casing. He simply stared. "You thinking of using that?" came Mila's voice behind him. "No," Idris replied, "but we may need it." Meanwhile, news broke across the galactic net. The Varun had blockaded the Helix Passage, Earth's only safe route to the core worlds. All trade, all diplomacy, cut. And in the shadows of this growing war, something older stirred. In the ruins of Vespera, deep beneath the molten crust, Earth's deep skin probes unearthed the beacon. Not Varun, not human, older, triangular, pulsing, still alive. On board the Kestrel, Dr. Lyra Van, the crew's xenoarchaeologist, ran tests. Her findings chilled the crew more than the Varun threats. This device was placed millennia ago, before humanity even left Earth's orbit. Who built it? Idris asked. Unknown. But it transmitted a signal. It activated during the attack. Not toward Earth. Not even this galaxy. Mila frowned. Then where? Dr. Van hesitated. Outward, into the intergalactic void. Idris stared at the projection of the beacon's pulse. Silent, rhythmic, haunting. Someone else heard what happened here. He muttered. Someone who's been waiting. Then the next wave hit. 3 human ships, diplomatic vessels, en route to Caldros 2, were intercepted and hollowed, not destroyed, emptied, no hull breach, no sign of life, just drifting ghost ships, still powered, lights flickering. Crew and passengers vanished without trace. Even the Varun denied responsibility. Earth scientists suggested a new weapon. Idris suspected something worse. They wanted to scare us before, he said grimly. Now they want to confuse us, unravel us from within. The crew began to fracture. Tensions rose. Hope faltered. Idris sat alone in his quarters, watching an old holo from his daughter, now ash in the Vesperan wind. She was 6. She sang a lullaby once sung on old Earth. He hadn't listened to it since she left for Vespera. His hands trembled, but his voice, when he spoke, was iron. We're done waiting. Edo for old station time. Idris gathered the crew. A new signal had come in. Earth had just voted to authorize a covert strike. Unofficial. Off the record. No reinforcements. No backup. Just one ship. The Kestrel. The old vessel groaned in its bones as its aging reactor core spun to life. Kale grinned through his nerves. We're flying straight into the mouth of hell. Mila smiled faintly. Then let's show them what it means to bite back. Idris looked to the stars, cold and uncaring, and whispered, let's remind them why they feared us. The Varun called it a ghost ship. The rest of the galaxy called it a myth. We called it Kestrel. The Kestrel tore across the dark lanes of the Helix Passage, her fusion core screaming through containment thresholds, her hull burning blue against the gravity fractures that stitched the void like scars. Idris Harlan stood in the command cradle, flanked by silence and shadows. Every system was redlined. Every course correction was a gamble with death. But the crew moved with purpose, with fury, with faith. We'll breach the blockade perimeter. In 11 minutes, Mila said, no cover, no fleet, just us is enough. Idris replied. Their target was Relay Station, Orican, a critical Varun listening post near the choke point to Earth's remaining expansion routes. Not a warship, not a fortress, but it was visible. It was defended, and it was important. If they could destroy it, it would shatter the illusion of Varun invincibility. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we leave wreckage loud enough to shake the stars, Idris said to the crew minutes before drop. No survivors on their side, Kale muttered, locking. In torpedo paths, message has to be clear. Mila glanced at him. And what about us? Idris met their eyes. There is no after if we fail. The Kestrel dropped from fold space like a blade. Orican's orbital sentries flared to life, spitting at antimatter pulses. But they were late, too slow. The Kestrel spun under the barrage, old, armored, and angry. She bled sparks, vented coolant, but held steady. Kel's torpedoes launched for Ghost-class gravitic warheads. Old Earth tech the Varun never adapted to. The blast was instant, silent, pure. The relay station bloomed like a dying star. All across the outer systems, sensors screamed. For the first time since Vespera's fall, a human ship had struck first and won. News spread like wildfire. Through smuggler channels, pirate nets, fringe relays, 1,000 oppressed species watched the footage in stunned silence. Some dared to hope, others began to move. In the aftermath, Idris convened the crew. They were bruised, burned, exhausted, but smiling. For the record, Kale said, grinning, we just punched the Galactic Empire in the face and lived. Mila added, barely. The Kestrel's left stabilizer was gone, shields at 12%. The drive core held together by ancient redundancy algorithms and raw human stubbornness. Idris paced slowly. That wasn't war. That was noise. The room fell. Quiet. The real war's coming, he said. And Earth is still hesitating. What are we supposed to do? Valera Van asked. Another colony will burn before they vote again. Idris looked down at a data crystal in his hand. Then we make it impossible not to fight. That night, Idris sat alone in the Kestrel's old memory vault, a quiet room filled with cold lights and fragmented voices of the past. He inserted the crystal. Holograms flickered. Project. Remnant. He pulled it from a classified vault on Titan years ago. Supposedly erased. Buried. But Idris had never been one to follow orders. It was a log. A conversation between Earth's earliest deep space explorers. Voices full of awe. They spoke of a structure beyond map space. Something vast, something asleep, not alien, not Varun, older. One voice, trembling with something like reverence, whispered, they weren't gods, but they taught us how to become more. Idris leaned forward. There was a name in the final frame, Echotrax, Mila. He said hours later, give me everything on Echotrax. Cross-reference old Mars archives, anything from pre-contact era. Black sites, descent channels. I don't care how buried it is. Mila raised an eyebrow. That's ghost story territory, Captain. Ghosts are exactly what we need. Across the stars, the Varun responded, but not with words. They unleashed something. A system near the Tau Belt, Silas 9, went dark. No transmissions, no energy, no heat. Earth sent probes. They never returned. Then a signal arrived. Visual only, a Varun priest executor. Standing atop a mountain of human bodies. We will not speak again, it said. Your kind has no place in the order. Idris stared into the blood-lit projection. We didn't ask for a place, he said softly. And still, the pulse from Vespera's buried beacon continued. Every 39 seconds, a call, a memory. Or a warning. Dr. Van sat in silence, watching the rhythm play across her screen. Captain, she whispered, I don't think we're the only ones listening anymore. Then the call came from Earth. Encrypted, untraceable. Strategic command. The silver-haired general again. Her expression unreadable. You made your noise, she said. The Senate can't ignore you now. Will they act? Idris asked. A pause. They authorized excision protocol, she replied. The room froze. That name hadn't been spoken in decades. God help us, Mila murmured. Idris simply nodded. Good. Where will you go? Next the general asked. Idris glanced at the pulsar map still glowing on the wall. Where the old voices sleep, he said, to Echo Tracks. Echo Tracks wasn't lost. It was buried, because even Earth feared what it remembered. They reached it under blackout flight, riding ancient navigation whispers from a forgotten war. The Kestrel, cracked and humming like a ghost, limped through the veil rift, a swirling nebula of unstable dark matter, long marked inaccessible by Earth Fleet Command. At the center, shrouded in dust and false readings, was a dead planet wrapped in rings of broken stone and frozen satellites. Echo Tracks. It looked like a graveyard, because it was. Idris Harlan stared down at the surface scans. The planet was silent, yes, but not empty. There was structure, architecture, deliberate geometry etched into the crust, visible only through spectral alignment. Buildings aligned to frequencies, not sunrises. Towers beneath the dust shaped like tuning forks, vibrating across time. Not air, not Varun, whispered Dr. Alira Van. Not even close. Kale stared at the deepest scan. Are those human signatures? Alira nodded. Or something that used to be. They landed near the ruins of what once must have been a citadel, now half swallowed by the black sand. The air shimmered, not with heat, with memory. Voices whispered. On every frequency, untranslated fragments from minds long gone. They weren't cries. They were instructions. Echo Tracks was a library and a warning. Inside the citadel, Idris touched the central monolith. The moment his fingers brushed it, light flooded the chamber. Lifts flared. Gravity bent, and a vision slammed into his mind like thunder. He stood on a battlefield, not of flesh and steel, but thought and resonance. He saw machines falling from the sky like weeping gods. He saw Earth, not as it was, but as it was becoming, something vast, unknowable, awake. And at the center of it all, a single phrase etched into the ruin of stars. The singularity did not fail. It was interrupted. He gasped and fell to one knee. Mila caught him. What did you see us? Idris said breathlessly, a version of us, before we chose fear, before we forgot. Alira's eyes widened. You're saying this isn't just a lost colony. No, Idris said, this is what we were supposed to become. But as the crew gathered the fragments, the enemy moved in orbit above New Ararat, a peaceful civilian outpost near Saturn's ring line. 5. Varun dreadnoughts emerged from fold space. No warning, no dialogue. They turned the colony's oceans into steam in under 7 minutes. Over 100,000 human lives gone. The Varun left no survivors. Only a symbol, burned into the surface using orbital lasers. A single, cracked human skull. Earth's Senate erupted in chaos. Two factions emerged overnight. One cried for peace. No escalation, they pleaded. We cannot win. The other roared for war. No more planets. No more ashes. But while politicians bickered, the streets rose. Riots spread from Europa to Mars Prime. People chanted Idris Harlan's name. And across secret channels, the Kestrel's footage of Echo Tracks leaked. Not all of it. Just enough to awaken questions. Enough to remind humanity that their past was bigger and older than the Varian ever guessed. Back aboard the Kestrel, Mila slammed a report onto the table. It's not just the Varian anymore. What do you mean? Idris asked. She pulled up distorted footage from the Silas 9 system. The one that had gone dark. A silhouette. Moved through vacuum. Not a ship. Not biological. Something made of light and shadow. Moving between dimensions like a thought. It appeared after the beacon activated on Vespera. Mila whispered. Whatever buried that signal. It's awake now. Idris paced. This isn't just war anymore. Kale nodded. It's memory. History. And we're caught in it. Then came the betrayal. The Kestrel's long-range scans picked up a distress ping. A Terran refugee vessel, Alabaster Sun, under Varian pursuit. The Kestrel moved in. Despite warnings, they reached the ship, extended docking latches, and prepared for evac. The Alabaster Sun's doors opened, and fire poured out. Automated. Turrets, spies, Earth operatives, corrupted or coerced, working with the Veru. Kale took a hit to the shoulder. Alira lost the fingers. Idris dragged the last traitor into the Kestrel's war room and slammed him into the bulkhead. "Who sent you?" he roared. The man bled from the mouth but smiled. "You think you're fighting for Earth," he hissed. "But Earth sold you out the moment you left orbit. They're making peace," he spat, "with the only ones strong enough to survive what's coming." Then his body spasmed and self-immolated. They jettisoned the remains in silence. No words were spoken that night, but Idris stood alone at the viewport, watching the broken lights of the stars. "We trusted our leaders," Mila said behind him. "That's our mistake," Idris replied. "Then who do we trust now?" Idris turned. His voice was cold and certain. "Each other." A message arrived an hour later, encrypted, hidden inside old Earth broadcast frequencies. No name, no signature, just a voice, ancient, human. "You have found what they tried to bury. Do not stop. Do not kneel. Come to the ark beneath Echo's maw, and coordinates Earth had erased centuries ago. We were never meant to survive the war. We were meant to end it. That was the ark's purpose." The Kestrel descended into the gravity well of Echo's maw, a failed star swallowed by its own silence, a black dwarf wrapped in magnetic storms and time-distorted debris fields. No ship had entered its orbit in over 300 years. The coordinates whispered from the unknown voice had led them here. Below the fractured event horizon, nestled between gravitational scars and dust frozen in suspension, floated an ancient structure. The Ark, not a ship, not a station, a vault, cyclopean rings of obsidian alloy, rotating against physics, humming with codes too old to read. Its surface bore no lights, only scars from weapons no one could name. The Ark predated the Veru, predated Earth's interstellar birth, and inside, it held what Idris Harlan suspected was humanity's forbidden inheritance. The Kestrel docked with a resonant hiss. Their suits flickered against ambient radiation. Mila's HUD spat errors that shouldn't exist. "Gravities, fluctuating," she muttered. "Not artificial, intentional, like it's breathing." They passed through doors that did not open. They simply yielded. Inside, silence. Then a voice filled the void. Not mechanical, not alien. Human. Idris Harlan. "Access granted. You carry the memory." The crew froze. Kale whispered. "What the hell does that mean?" Idris stepped forward, heart pounding. "It means it knows us." The walls ignited. Glyphs, symbols, fragments of language from 1,000 Earth cultures, converging into meaning. "Welcome to Edalan Protocol." The final option. They reached the core chamber. There, suspended in a lattice of null light and orbiting data rings, was the payload, Edalan. Ascension network, forged in the earliest days of the AI wars, abandoned for being too dangerous, too unpredictable. It wasn't a weapon. It was a choice. It contained a full cognitive imprint of humanity's collective evolution, memories, instincts, languages, fears, art, and will, distilled into a form of recursive identity ignition. Alira Van, pale, whispered, "This isn't just a machine. It's a mirror." Mila looked up. "A mirror of what?" Idris answered without looking away. "Of what we become when we stop being afraid." The voice returned. "To unleash. This protocol is to forego the galactic order. IT cannot be controlled. It can only be trusted." Kale turned to Idris, voice sharp. "You can't be seriously considering this." "I'm done considering," Idris said. "But Earth didn't bury this." Idris snapped. "They locked it away because they were afraid of our own potential." He looked at the crew, not officers, not soldiers, just humans, scarred, chosen, everyone out. He said, "This is my decision." But no one moved. Mila stepped beside him. Not alone. Kale, still bleeding from the ambush 2 nights ago, nodded. "All in, Alira Van, even if it means we don't come back." Idris nodded once, eyes glistening. "Especially then." They activated the Edalan protocol. The Ark shook, not violently, but profoundly, as if the very space around it remembered its shape. The rings spun faster. Code screamed across their suits. The Kestrel systems rebooted on their own, as if realigning with something deeper. In orbit, the stars bent, not to destroy, to listen. Back on Earth, Alarms went off deep within the strategic core. Old protocols, locked since the post-singularity, ban, flared to life. AI sentinels woke screaming before going silent. The Prime Minister demanded answers. The generals could only say, Idalon is online, and is listening to him. The Varun responded immediately. Within hours, 7 fleets departed from the galactic core. They did not posture. They came to end Earth. The Kestrel intercepted the threat on open channels. Varun Command issued a singular statement. You were warned. You refused order. Now you will be erased. Not just your colonies, but your memory. Idris stared at the transmission. Then he responded, You think memory is fragile. That fear makes us forget. But you've misunderstood everything about humanity. We are not afraid of death. We remember it, and we build from it. As Earth debated surrender, and the stars braced for war, the Kestrel transmitted a single signal. A pulse encoded with Idalon's root key. Every human ship, every colony, every abandoned satellite and drone suddenly lit up. Old tech woke. Obsolete weapons rearmed. And beneath the ice of Europa, a forgotten fleet, Project Retribution, stirred from its cryo dream. Back aboard the Kestrel, Idris stood in the war room. A holographic star map stretched before him. He placed one hand over a blinking red star. The Varun Central Command System. Hero's volume. Mila stepped forward, whispering, You're not planning to? Yes, Idris said. They erased Vespera. He looked into the growing light of the Idalon signal, spreading like wildfire across the void. Now we erase them. By the time the Varun reached Sol, the stars had already changed sides. Idalon wasn't just waking us up, it was reminding the galaxy who we were. The Kestrel stood at the heart of a rising storm. Around it, Earth's lost fleets. Reassemble. Ghost ships from forgotten wars, experimental platforms once deemed unstable, defense satellites buried under Martian dust and Antarctic ice, all reactivated by Idalon. They weren't sleek or beautiful like Varun dreadnoughts. They were ugly, angular, scarred, but they were human, and they moved like they remembered the taste of fire. Across the inner colonies, the tide shifted. Protesters stopped marching. They started building, repairing, arming. The whispered words became law. No one else dies alone. In orbit over Europa, the final war council was held aboard the Kestrel. Idris Harlan stood before the gathered captains. Most were AI proxies relaying from half-repaired bridges. Some were scarred veterans who had once lost hope, now wide-eyed again. Behind Idris, the Idalon glyph pulsed across the holo map like a heartbeat. We don't match their numbers, he said. We don't match their elegance. We don't have world killers or gravity cannons. He paused. What we have is something older. Kale stepped forward, wounded shoulder bound, in black carbon wrap. We remember why we fight. Mila nodded. And we don't fight for thrones or titles. We fight for each other. Idris raised his eyes to the stars above. When they burned Vespera, they made a mistake. He clenched his fist. They let us live long enough to remember who we are. The plan was suicide on paper. Strike. At the Varun's neural throne world, Yero's volume, located within the Obsidian starfield, a system designed to trap and disorient invading fleets. Its defense grid rotated on quantum phase algorithms, but Idalon had cracked them, because Idalon remembered them. As the fleets prepared to fold out, Earth Senate tried to intervene. Encrypted message, stand down. Diplomatic solutions are in motion. You are risking total annihilation. Idris didn't even respond. The Kestrel was already gone. The fleet emerged into Yero's volume like knives through silk. The system blinked red in response. Hundreds of Varun vessels waited. Towering, black-veined, organic and mechanical, they shifted shape mid-flight, powered by dark singularities and wrath. But the human fleet didn't flinch, because at the front, bleeding sparks and fire, pulsing with Idalon's living code, the Kestrel led the charge. The opening volley was chaos. Varun spear frigates cleaved through Earth's perimeter. Human ships detonated in brilliant screams of color, but then the old code kicked in. Saturn-class interceptors from the Orion Uprising rewrote the laws of thrust with fusion curls. Venusian mine drones from the solar schism pierced Varun shields from within. Even derelict hulls, tethered by memory and Idalon's pulse, turned kamikaze, shattering enemy command ships like glass. They weren't fighting with a fleet. They were fighting as one. The Kestrel dove through the chaos, shields down, systems howling. Inside, every crew member moved on instinct. Kale at weapons. Alira recalibrating navigation mid-drift, Mila reading Varun trajectory patterns like sheet music. Idris never blinked. He was no longer a captain. He was memory, incarnate. But then, as they breached the final layer of Euros Vol's perimeter, the core dreadnought arrived. Varun flagship, solace of ruin, 2 miles of living alloy, powered by a dead sun. It spoke as it fired. You were children when we found you. We gave you stars. You gave us blood. Now we reclaim what you borrowed. The blast struck. The Kestrel broadside. Hull breach, engines failing. Alira screamed as Kale was thrown from his station. Idris roared, dragging him back. We finished this. Dalan's voice whispered through the broken comms. Target sequence aligned. Final directive requires manual confirmation. Idris staggered to the command node. One hand, one voice. Confirm, from deep within the Kestrel. A shard of the Dalan core detached. It fired from the ship like a silver comet, faster than light, bound in old Terran code and new resolve. It struck the solace of ruin not with fire, but with remembrance. For 1 second, every Varun ship across the system saw Earth. As it burned, rebuilt, wept, sang, fell, and stood again. It was too much, too human, too real. The solace of ruin collapsed in on itself, its AI screaming into the void before. Blinking out like a dying thought, the field fell silent. Varun ships flickered, many retreated. Some turned off their weapons, not from mercy, but from something older, recognition. Aboard the Kestrel, systems flickered. Fires burned unchecked. Idris limped to the viewport. Mila, status, she coughed blood. We're not going home. He smiled faintly, didn't plan to. Kale, barely conscious, saluted from where he lay. Alira wept softly, watching. The Varun flee. The stars began to sing again, and from deep within Dalan's code, one final message pulsed to every corner of the galaxy. We are not your children. We are your equals, and we remember. The Kestrel was burning. The crew was dying, but humanity had never stood taller. Flames danced down the Kestrel's corridor like ribbons of defiance. Oxygen was rationed to vital compartments. Only one reactor was gone. The other groaned like a dying heart. Idris Harlan stood on the shattered bridge, a jagged beam piercing through the viewport above him, casting fractured starlight across the floor. Blood smeared his temple. His hands shook, but his eyes burned like the core of a newborn. Son. Behind him, Mila Voss clung to the nav console, her suit torn, voice hoarse. 17 Varun warships retreating, 12 more disabled. They're falling back. Kale coughed violently, dragging himself up by a ruined bulkhead. Some stayed. He croaked. The ones who still believed were insects. Idris nodded slowly, gaze locked on the star map flickering before him. They're wrong. The remaining Varun. Dreadnoughts repositioned. Unlike the others, these did not speak. They didn't threaten, didn't posture. They advanced in silence, weapons armed, formations perfect, their movements cold as extinction. They weren't there to dominate. They were there to erase. In Earth orbit, chaos reigned. The Senate screamed orders. Fleets were repositioned. Civilians fled underground as alarms howled across Luna, Mars Prime, and Titan Haven. But the Kestrel didn't fall back. It surged forward. One ship, one weapon, one moment left. Deep in the Kestrel's shattered engineering core, Dalan's final protocol came online. The Singularity Spear, an ancient construct, never activated, built from humanity's last collective dream of godhood. It was never meant to fire. It was meant to be understood, to become. But now, as the galaxy braced for judgment, it had one last task. Alira Van, her body failing, limped to the control lattice. Her fingers hovered over the final key. I studied ancient Terran myths, she whispered into the ship's comms. The last arrow of Artemis. The death cry of Fenrir. The day Prometheus bled stars. She looked up. And I always wondered what our myth would be. She pressed. The key. The Singularity Spear activated. Not with light, but with remembrance. All across the galaxy, machines paused. Sleepers woke. Abandoned outposts lit up. Even Varun subquantum relays began receiving static that resolved, over time, into voices. Human voices, crying, laughing, singing, screaming, living. Every memory Dalan had ever captured, every heartbeat of human history launched. At faster than light speed toward the remaining Varun fleet, the dreadnoughts faltered, shields collapsed, One by one, they were overwhelmed, not by energy, but by understanding, by the weight of what humanity was and still could be. Idris watched them fall, not burning, just ending, silently, gracefully, as if they, too, understood. This was not annihilation, it was evolution, but the price came swiftly. Eidolon's core, never designed for deployment on that scale, was destabilizing. The Kestrel's structure began collapsing from within. Mila, bleeding badly, turned to Idris. "We can't outrun it. Not this time." Kale gave a broken laugh. "Hell of a last stand." Alira's voice whispered across the comms. "It's beautiful." The ship's reactor breached containment. Time slowed, space rippled, and then light. Not destructive, not burning, just warm. It spread outward like dawn breaking across forgotten shores. In that instant, every human across the galaxy felt it. Children in underground shelters looked to the sky and smiled. Soldiers on barren moons wept without knowing why. Even Earth's oldest AI networks paused and whispered the same name, Kestrel. The Kestrel vanished, not destroyed, ascended. The ship, the crew, became story etched into the living memory of Eidolon, carried across time by every signal, every pulse, every scar in the void. A week later, the remaining Varian ships withdrew from the Sol system. No demands, no explanation, just silence. And in that silence, humanity stood alone again, but not afraid, never again afraid. Earth held a gathering, not a funeral, not a celebration, but something in between. On the steps of the ruined Senate Hall, a child placed a model of the Kestrel. At the base of the new memorial, beneath it, the inscription read, "This was the ship that remembered us." Across the stars, things changed, small things. A Varian research vessel approached a human outpost unarmed. A 1,000-year-old AI on Europa began humming an Earth lullaby. No one had programmed it to know, and from the edges of map space, unknown signals whispered, "We heard you, but for now." In the heart of what was once the battlefield of Euro's volume, only echoes remained, and light, so much light. "We were broken, but we were never beaten." That was the last message Eidolon whispered to the stars. 31 years had passed since the Kestrel vanished into light. Not everyone remembered the war the same way. Some called it the last stand of Earth. Others, the singularity dawn. But to those who carried the names of Idris Harlan, Mila, Voss, Kale, and Alira Van in their blood, it was simply the day we became human again. The galaxy changed, not overnight, but permanently. The Varian Empire fractured. Their priest executors vanished from public sight, their fleets grounded. The stars they had claimed in conquest dimmed, as if ashamed. Whispers told of internal revolts. Young Varian questioning their order, tracing back the message, burned into their flagship's collapse. You were never gods. You were just first. On Earth, there were no more senates, no more unreachable brass. The world reorganized, not under a flag, but under memory. A new network governed Sol in its colonies, the Remembrance Accord. Its charter was simple, no voice erased, no soul forgotten, no child orphaned by the stars again. Europa's deep ice bloomed with light. Under it, the Eidolon archive pulsed. No longer centralized, no longer hidden, it lived in every human ship, every outpost, every neural thread connecting Earth to its descendants. Not controlled, shared, not weaponized, remembered. In the cradle of Ember Light, a massive rotating museum station orbiting Earth. A chamber was built. Inside it, a reconstruction of the Kestrel's bridge, lovingly restored from recovered sensor data and AI fragments. Visitors came from across systems to walk it. Some stood silent in front of Idris Harlan's captain's chair. Others wept. A child once asked her mother, "Why is the floor cracked here?" The mother smiled softly. That's where Kale stood when he made the last joke the universe would ever forget. The Varian ambassador came to decades after the war ended. Alone, unarmed, it stood before the Remembrance Council, tall, elegant, humble. "I do not speak for what was," it said, "only for what must be." They offered no apology, only an artifact from the ruins of Yero's volume, recovered in silence, kept hidden. A piece of the Kestrel's hull, blackened, cracked, but intact, etched into it. Scorched by time and war, this is what we are. Humanity never expanded the way the Varian did. They didn't colonize by conquest anymore. They listened, they offered, they remembered. And because of that, the galaxy opened to them in ways it never had before. On a quiet moon far beyond the helix verge, a small child stood alone beneath a fractured sky. She was born long after the war, but carried Eidolon in her blood. She knelt and pressed her hand to the ancient soil, and the ground answered her in the language of memory, a voice from long ago. They will come to fear us, then respect us. But one day, they'll understand us. Idris Harlan, the stars no longer feared Earth. They honored it, and when new species emerged, when old alliances were tested, when darkness gathered again, as it always does, they told the same story every cycle, of a ship that burned through night, of a crew that didn't back down, of a people who remembered who they were in the face of extinction. In the final entry of the Eidolon log, encoded deep in its lattice, one last fragment plays in silence. It shows the Kestrel, surrounded by fire, dissolving into light, and Idris Harlan's voice, calm and certain, speaking one last time. If you're hearing this, it means we did it. We remembered. We made the choice, not for power, not for revenge, but for tomorrow. Whatever you are, wherever you're standing, just know this: the moment you choose each other over fear, you become human, too. And so the galaxy changed, not because of ships, or weapons, or victories, but because of one broken crew on one dying ship who refused to forget what it meant to stand together. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human,